The wind carried dust across the empty plains as the sun sank behind the red cliffs. The land was quiet except for the soft rustle of dry grass and the sound of footsteps approaching a lonely wooden ranch house. Inside, a widowed rancher named Samuel sat near the fireplace, his tired eyes fixed on the flames. It had been years since he had heard laughter in that house. The sound of his wife's voice had faded into memory, and his cattle were the only company left to fill the silence. He was a man who worked from sunrise to sunset, speaking only to the land that refused to let him rest. That evening, as the light dimmed, he heard something unusual. Faint knocks echoed against his door, followed by a woman's trembling voice. "Please, sir. We'll work, we'll cook, we'll serve, just let us in." Samuel froze for a moment, wondering if it was his imagination. Then he heard it again, softer but desperate. He stood up, reached for the lantern, and opened the door slowly. Outside stood 3 young Apache women. Their clothes were torn from travel, and their faces carried the marks of exhaustion. They had been walking for days through dust and cold nights, hoping to find shelter. The tallest, who looked to be the oldest, stood in front. Her eyes were brave even though her voice trembled. "We mean no harm," she said quietly. "We just need a place to rest. We'll work for food. We'll clean, anything." Samuel looked at them for a long moment. He had seen fear in the eyes of men before, but what he saw in theirs was different. Not fear of him, but fear of being turned away again. The world had not been kind to Apache women, especially after the fighting between settlers and tribes. People saw them as strangers even when all they wanted was peace. The rancher could have closed the door and gone back to his fire. It would have been easier. But something inside him didn't let him. He stepped aside and said, "Come in. You can rest here for tonight." The sisters entered slowly, unsure if they were really welcome. The warmth of the room touched their faces, and one of them, the youngest, almost cried when she felt the heat of the fire. Samuel handed them each a cup of water, then turned back to his chair. "You can sleep by the fire," he said. "There's stew left in the pot. Eat what you can." For a while, no one spoke. The 3 women sat quietly, their hands shaking as they ate small bites of stew. The silence in the house began to change. Samuel noticed how the soft murmur of their voices made the room feel alive again. The middle sister, named Nita, thanked him with eyes full of tears. "You are kind," she said softly. Most men would not have opened the door. Samuel didn't know what to say. He wasn't a man used to words anymore. "You said you'll work," he finally replied. "What can you do?" The eldest sister straightened her back. "We can cook, clean, tend to animals," she said. "We worked in camps. We know how to sew and gather wood. We'll earn our place if you let us stay." He studied their faces, tired yet determined. He nodded slowly. "Then stay," he said. "We'll see how it goes." The next morning, sunlight poured into the small windows of the ranch. For the first time in years, Samuel woke to the sound of voices humming softly and the smell of breakfast cooking. The sisters had risen before dawn, sweeping the porch, feeding the chickens, and boiling coffee. When Samuel stepped outside, he saw the youngest sister trying to carry a heavy bucket of water from the well. Without a word, he took it from her and set it down near the trough. She looked up shyly and whispered, "Thank you." Days turned into weeks. The ranch began to change. The sisters brought warmth and rhythm to the place. The eldest, Helena, handled the kitchen with calm authority. Nita took care of the animals and even helped Samuel mend fences. The youngest, Eleni, filled the air with songs she whispered while cleaning. Samuel didn't realize how lonely he had been until he caught himself listening for those voices every morning. The townsfolk, however, began to whisper. They saw the Apache women living on the ranch and judged quickly. "He's lost his mind," one man said at the general store. "Bringing savages into his home? He'll regret it." Samuel ignored the talk. He had seen more goodness in those 3 women than in half the men he'd met. Still, he knew the world outside his ranch fence could turn cruel if provoked. One evening, as he and Nita worked side by side fixing the barn roof, she asked, "Why did you help us, Mr. Samuel?" "You didn't even know us," he paused, looking at the sunset. "Because once," he said slowly, "someone helped me when I didn't deserve it, and I've never forgotten what it meant." She smiled, understanding. "Then we'll make this place better," she said. "You'll see," and she did. The ranch began to look alive again. Fences repaired, gardens planted, walls cleaned. Even the horses seemed calmer. Samuel often found himself watching the sisters work, wondering what fate had brought them to his door. Sometimes when he sat near the fire at night, He caught Talina looking at the stars through the window, her expression soft and distant. He realized then that she too carried heavy memories, perhaps of a family lost or a life left behind. One cold night, a knock came again on the door. Samuel opened it to find a sheriff and 2 townsmen standing outside. Their eyes shifted past him into the room where the sisters sat quietly. "Evening, Sam," the sheriff said, his tone cautious. "Got word you're keeping Apache women here. You know folks don't take kindly to that." Samuel's hand tightened on the door. "They're under my roof," he said firmly. "They've done no wrong." The sheriff sighed. "Just be careful. People talk. Some of them might act." After they left, Talina approached him. "We don't want trouble," she said gently. "If you wish us gone, we'll go." Samuel shook his head. "You're not leaving." "This is your home now, too." The words hung in the air, and for the first time since that night they arrived, Talina smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. That evening, as the fire glowed and wind howled outside, the ranch felt full of life and belonging. For Samuel, it was no longer just a house on the prairie. It had become something more, a home where the lonely and forgotten found warmth again. But beyond the hills, trouble was already brewing. A group of men from town had decided that Samuel's kindness was a mistake they wouldn't allow to stand. The peace that filled the little ranch was about to be tested, and when it came, neither Samuel nor the Apache sisters would ever be the same again. The following weeks passed peacefully, but Samuel could sense a storm building, not in the sky but among the people in town. The whispers grew louder. When he went to buy supplies, men who once greeted him now looked away. Some muttered under their breath. He ignored them, but deep down he knew things wouldn't stay quiet forever. Back at the ranch, life continued as normal. The sisters filled the days with work and laughter, trying to repay Samuel's kindness in every way they could. Talina cooked warm meals that reminded Samuel of home. Nita took charge of the garden, turning dry soil into rows of growing vegetables, and little Eleni made the place shine with her cheerful spirit. She would hum soft songs from her tribe while sweeping the porch, and even the horses seemed calmer when she sang. One morning, as Samuel returned from checking the far fence line, he saw the sisters kneeling near the garden, planting flowers they had gathered from the creekside. It was a small thing, but to him it changed everything. The ranch no longer looked like a place of sorrow. It looked alive. When Talina noticed him watching, she smiled. "Flowers make any place kinder," she said. "Even for the earth that has forgotten joy." Samuel nodded, his heart softening. "You've brought more than flowers," he said quietly. "You've brought back life." But peace never lasts long in a place where pride and prejudice grow stronger than crops. That evening, a wagon stopped by the ranch gate. 4 men from town stepped down, their faces serious. They called for Samuel. He walked out slowly, wiping his hands on his shirt. Talina and her sisters stood by the doorway, silent and afraid. The man in front was the same storekeeper who used to trade with Samuel. "We came to talk," he said in a cold tone. "This ain't right, Sam. You're keeping them here like family. People are angry. They say you've forgotten who you are." Samuel's face stayed calm. "They work here," he replied. "They've done nothing wrong. They've earned their place." The man shook his head. "That may be, but the town won't stand for it. You're risking your name. You could lose your business. You could lose everything." Samuel looked back at the sisters. They stood close together, trying not to meet anyone's eyes. Then he turned again to the men. "I already lost everything once," he said softly. "Now I found something worth keeping." The men said no more. They got back into their wagon and left, but their looks carried warning. The sisters were quiet for the rest of the night. After dinner, Nita spoke for all of them. "We didn't mean to bring you trouble," she said. "We can leave if you wish." Samuel shook his head firmly. "You're not going anywhere. The world's full of hard people, but I don't intend to be one of them." The sisters exchanged glances. In that moment, they knew they had found something rare, a man whose heart was not ruled by fear or pride. They decided that no matter what happened, they would stand beside him. Over the next few days, the townsfolk's anger began to fade when they saw how hard the sisters worked. When the church roof needed fixing, Nita and Eleni sent food to the workers. When a neighbor's child fell ill, Talina went with Samuel to bring soup and herbs. Slowly, people began to see them not as strangers but as kind and humble women. One morning, Samuel woke to the smell of warm bread baking in the oven. The sisters had prepared a special breakfast to thank him for protecting them. Eleni placed a small woven cloth on the table, something she had made from leftover fabric. "It's for your home," she said shyly. "So you remember us even if one day we go." He looked at the cloth, then at them, and smiled. "I won't need a cloth to remember you," he said. "You've already become part of this place." But life in the West was unpredictable. A long drought arrived, and the ranch faced new challenges. The well ran low and the cattle grew thin. Samuel worked from dawn until late night trying to save what he could. The sisters worked beside him, refusing to rest. Together they carried water from the creek miles away, took turns caring for the animals, and shared every bit of food. One evening, when exhaustion showed on everyone's faces, Talina looked at Samuel and said, "When we first came here, we had nothing. You gave us a home. Now it's our turn to help you keep it." Her words struck deep. For the first time in years, Samuel didn't feel alone in his struggle. Weeks passed, and the rains finally came. The land turned green again, and hope returned to the ranch. The sisters danced in the rain like children, laughing as water fell from the sky. Samuel watched from the porch, his heart full. He couldn't remember the last time he had smiled so freely. By late autumn, the ranch was thriving once more. Cattle were healthy, crops were strong, and laughter filled the evenings. But what truly changed was the bond between them all. They were no longer strangers, no longer rescuer and rescued. They were family. One evening, the sheriff rode up to the ranch again. This time, he didn't come with warnings. He stepped off his horse, tipped his hat, and said, "Sam, I reckon those sisters of yours have done more good for this town than anyone expected." "Folks are talking again, but this time they're saying maybe you were right." Samuel nodded, a quiet smile on his face. "They just needed a chance," he said. The sheriff looked around. The place glowed with warmth. The porch swept clean, the lantern light shining from the windows, the laughter of the sisters carrying softly in the breeze. "Looks like you gave them one," the sheriff said. "And they gave it back tenfold." After he left, Samuel joined the sisters at the dinner table. They spoke about the coming winter, about saving enough food, about the animals, and about the town's new kindness. Talina looked at Samuel, her eyes gentle. "You believed in us when no one else did," she said. "Because of that, we found a home." Samuel shook his head. "You believed first," he said. "You knocked on that door." "I just opened it." The room went quiet for a moment. The fire cracked softly. Then Eleni smiled and said, "Then maybe that's all the world needs, one door to open." Outside, the moon rose high above the ranch. The land stretched silent and calm, washed in silver light. The ranch that once held only sorrow now held laughter, faith in second chances. Years later, travelers passing through the valley would speak of the ranch where a cowboy and 3 Apache sisters built a life together out of kindness and hard work. They said the man was never lonely again, and that the sisters found peace among the fields they had once crossed in despair. The townspeople learned something too, that hearts are stronger when they open rather than close. The story spread quietly through the years, told by those who believed that goodness could still be found even in the roughest corners of the Wild West. And on quiet nights, when the wind moved through the grass, it seemed to carry faint echoes of a promise once spoken at that very door. "We'll work, we'll cook, we'll serve, just let us in." Samuel had let them in. And together they had built a home the world would never forget.